What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're going to be talking Miami Heat. I want to make a video about this team for months at this point, but of course they were just consistently wrapped up in star trade talks, so I didn't want to make a video, then they trade for a star and all of a sudden that video is obsolete. But nothing ever ended up happening. They went for Bradley Beal, who ended up going to the Suns. They went for Dame, who ended up going to the Bucks. And instead, the Heat entered this upcoming season kind of in a similar spot to the way they entered last year. But they entered last year and ended up making the NBA Finals, going on one of the most improbable finals runs of all time. One that pretty much nobody saw coming. I personally had them getting swept in the first round by the Milwaukee Bucks in my NBA playoff predictions video. But as they do pretty much all the time, the Heat proved me and everybody wrong, made a run to the finals, and entered this upcoming season as the reigning Eastern Conference champions. But there's not optimism surrounding them like you typically see with a team that just won the Eastern Conference and was a few wins away from winning an NBA Finals. There's a number of reasons why, but really, to me, it just feels like the Heat are firmly now a step behind a couple of other teams in the Eastern Conference. I really don't think they had a very good offseason. I think they struck out in a couple of ways where they really needed to hit to make this thing work, and ultimately, they might have slammed their own championship window shut by missing out on those opportunities. So today, I want to talk a little bit about why I think the Miami Heat are in big trouble and why ultimately this past finals appearance that we saw may be the very last one from this franchise's core. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Let's go ahead and get into it. First, let's talk a little bit about the Miami Heat core because it's the same core group of guys that have brought them to 2 NBA Finals and 3 out of the past Eastern Conference Finals. It's of course led by Jimmy Butler, who's one of the biggest playoff risers in the game of hoops, and in many people's eyes is a top 15, top 10 player. By the time you get to the playoffs, you probably don't have 5, 6 players even in the league that you're going to take over Jimmy Butler. He's that good when it comes to those big time moments. And with him on the roster, it really does feel like anything's possible. They've also got Bam Adebayo, who's one of the league's best overall defenders, one of the best centers period in the league, and still to me one of the more underrated guys in the NBA. Bam is really good. Does he have some aggressiveness and offensive issues? Sure, they pop up here and there, but I feel like when you need him most, Bam usually shows up, especially on the defensive end, where there's very few players that I would take over Bam at this point. They've also got Tyler Hero, who has been big for them for a number of years and is consistently one of their top offensive options, and they didn't even have him in their finals run this past summer. You've got Erik Spoelstra at the helm still, who I feel like at this point everybody can agree is the best coach in the league. I don't even think that's a question right now. He is amazing. He'll take undrafted second-round guys that no other team wants, and he'll just put them in positions to succeed, help them raise their value, and somehow become real contributors on a finals-level team. Alongside those guys, you've got a couple of other key players that have been big at moments, like Duncan Robinson, who had a bit of a resurgence in this past year's playoffs. Maybe this upcoming season is going to be big for him. Kyle Lowry, who they signed as a big piece a couple of off seasons ago. He's had some big time moments. He's definitely regressing as he gets up there in age, but still is good for a couple huge threes or a random charge that's just going to completely kill the other team's momentum at some point or another. But to me, Spo, Hero, Bam Adebayo, and mainly Jimmy Butler are the core of this team. As long as those 4 are there, they can be really good, and they've surprised a lot of people. Like I mentioned earlier, this team doesn't have the traditional superstar that you would expect. Nobody on this team is putting up gaudy numbers in the regular season. Nobody's being an MVP type of player. It's really just a really solid group of guys led by a big-time playoff riser in Jimmy that finds ways to get it done when they need to. And that's made them one of the most intriguing teams in the league over this run that they've been on. I mean, again, they went from 8 seed that was nearly out in the play-in tournament to beating the number 1 seeded Bucks, to taking down the Knicks, to taking down the Celtics after nearly blowing a 3-0 lead. In the bubble, they took down the number 1 overall seeded Bucks, who were on pace for a ridiculous record before the bubble hit. They gave a great fight to the Lakers, who were really heavily favored over them. This Heat team just finds ways to compete, and maybe they do so again this upcoming season and down the line. But this year it feels a bit different. There are 2 big reasons why I feel this way, and those 2 reasons are the Milwaukee Bucks and the Boston Celtics. Now, funnily enough, the Heat actually beat not one, but both of these teams en route to their finals appearance this past year, which was, again, extremely impressive coming from an 8 seed. They've beaten the Celtics at other points as well. They beat them to make the last finals they were in. In fact, they beat the Bucks in that run too. Like, they found ways to beat these teams, but they've also lost to them at times, losing to the Celtics in the 2022 Eastern Conference Finals and getting swept by the Bucks the year before in the first round. And Unfortunately for the Heat, and really the rest of the Eastern Conference, this isn't even a Heat problem specifically, it's really just an East problem. These current iterations of the Bucks and the Celtics are by far the best teams that we've seen from them in quite some time. Easily the best squads, in my opinion, that we've seen since this grouping came together over there in Miami. The Bucks, of course, add the Heat's #1 target in the offseason, Damian Lillard, who's going to fix a lot of their offensive issues, sets up one of the most talented duos in not just the league now, but probably in overall league history when you take a look at what they're able to do together as a pairing. Dame and Giannis being an elite pick and roll partnership. You still got Chris Middleton over there, Brook Lopez. Like, this squad is going to be completely ridiculous. I'm a believer that the Bucks are loaded with Dame. Sure, they've got some depth issues, but I don't think that matters when either Dame or Giannis can give you 30, 40, 50 points a night. Maybe even both of them can do the same on a single night. They are incredibly dangerous, and it makes them way more stable in the playoffs, in my opinion, and gives them a lot more room for error that they didn't really have in the past, specifically last year against the Heat. You've also got the Celtics, who they beat by 1 game last year and again nearly blew a 3-0 lead to. And now the Celtics have added not 1, but 2 all-star caliber players in this offseason, in Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday, who I think are both going to fix a lot of their problems offensively as well as defensively, and are going to help them prevent some of those collapses we've seen from the Celtics at times. We saw a number of those against the Heat in this past year's ECF, which caused them to go down 3-0 in the first place. With those guys in town, I don't see that happening at all again. Meanwhile, the Heat's offseason was just kind of eh. They lost 2 big contributors in their playoff run in Max Strus and Gabe Vincent. They don't make the finals without those 2 guys, and now they've got to find players that can both replicate what they did and also help them be even better because they weren't able to get over the hump last year, and now they've got to catch up with 2 stacked squads in the East. The players they added are interesting, Josh Richardson, Thomas Bryant, Jaime Jaquez, and RJ Hampton being the most notable names, but those aren't players that jump off the table to you. Josh Richardson, I thought, had a pretty underrated year last year, and I actually like him a lot as a pickup for the Heat, bringing him back here where he had the best years of his career under Spo. Maybe he's able to refine some of what he did in Miami and be one of the most underrated pickups of the offseason. But even if he does refine that form, is that going to be enough to make up for what you lost in both Strus and Vincent leaving your backcourt? They brought in Thomas Bryant, who I like as a floor-stretching big for this team. Really, they've been missing a great backup big for a while. Maybe Bryant could find some of what he's shown in the past and fit into that role, but he didn't really get much playtime at all last year with the Lakers or the Nuggets, who are both out there competing for championships, or trying to. He got traded from the Lakers because he wasn't playing, and the Nuggets, I don't think, suited him up once in the entire playoffs. Jaime Jaquez will probably be ready to contribute from day one as an older rookie, but is he going to be ready to be a playoff contributor from day one? And again, will that production he brings to the table be enough to make up for some of their shortcomings? RJ Hampton's on like his 1,000th team. The Heat always find these diamonds in the rough, but he's been given up by so many teams. Is he really going to find anything substantial here in Miami? They're also going to have to rely on guys that haven't played big roles to step up in a big way, like Haywood Highsmith, Orlando Robinson, Nikola Jovic, and I think all those guys are interesting pieces. But it just feels like a lot of what ifs for this team. They're hoping to recapture some potential from some guys, get some young players to step up. They need a lot of hits to make any type of roster that can compete with those juggernauts in the East. And I just don't see it all hitting to the point where they can reasonably compete with the Bucks or the Celtics, barring any major injuries. Now, I know there's already a lot of people who are commenting down below saying that I don't know what I'm talking about, that the Heat are going to prove me wrong, that I'm just wrong in general. And yeah, maybe I am. They've proved me wrong in the past. They did so multiple times this past playoffs, but I don't know. I just don't see the vision with this Heat team at the moment. I just don't see how they're going to compete with those top 2 teams in the East. I'm also sure a lot of you are going to mention, well, what about last year's playoff run? They seemed outmatched on paper, but it didn't matter. And yeah, that's true. But I don't think people realize just how improbable last year's run was for them. If you run like 1,000 simulations of last year's playoffs again, I don't know how many times that Heat team makes the finals the same way they did this past year. They went into the play-in tournament as a team that just had to win 1 game to make it to the playoffs, but instead they get blown out in their first play-in matchup against the Atlanta Hawks, losing by double digits, 11 points, and being down as much as 20 throughout the game. They won their second one against the Bulls, but they were down by 1 point with 2 minutes and 50 seconds to go. If the Bulls hit a couple more shots, the Bulls are the team that's there as the 8th seed, and the Heat don't even make the playoffs in the first place. but they won that one. They beat the number 1 overall seeded Bucks after Giannis went down, and Jimmy had 2 of the greatest individual playoff games that I've ever seen. One where he put up 56 points, one where he had 42 points to seal that series, and after that, Jimmy wasn't even that good. Like, he was still good, but he wasn't dominant. He put up 23.7 points per game, 6.3 rebounds, and 6.3 dimes on 41% shooting from the field, and 32% from 3. Like, again, he's good, but it's not phenomenal. Meanwhile, basically everybody else in the Heat stepped up tremendously. Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson became like a slashing point guard at some points. Caleb Martin, out of nowhere, could have probably won Eastern Conference Finals MVP. If I had a vote, I might have went for him as the winner of that award. They went from the 27th ranked three-point shooting team over the 82-game season to, in the playoffs, shooting 38% from 3, nearly 4% better, and becoming the best team in the NBA at shooting the deep ball. It was a crazy turnaround. They were an 8 seed full of undrafted guys, led by some stars that just clicked at the right moment. And that's not to take anything away from the Heat. They deserved all the success. Nobody gave that to them. I'm just saying, I'm not taking a look at that run and saying that it's going to directly translate into what they do this season. To me, this offseason was the perfect time for the Heat to capitalize on this momentum. They showed that they can take down almost anybody, so go out there and add a star player to truly solidify yourselves as maybe the best team in the East. They had chances. Bradley Beal was the first guy available. It was rumored that they were in the running for him. Then all of a sudden Phoenix pops in and boom, he ends up landing with the Phoenix Suns. Okay, you wanted to get Beal and I think he really would have helped this team, but it's not the end of the world, especially because not too long after, boom, Dame becomes available. And it's not just like, oh, maybe he wants to go to Miami. It's one of his number of preferred destinations. Miami was basically the only place Dame wanted to go for the longest time. He said pretty much publicly, I want to be a member of the Miami Heat. I want to play there. There was all these reports back and forth that the Heat and Blazers were posturing with each other, that they met at some point. It seemed almost inevitable that Dame at some point would end up with Miami. But instead, he goes to one of the Heat's biggest rivals in the Milwaukee Bucks, making them one of the most formidable teams in the entire NBA. So not only do the Heat not get Dame, he goes to one of their biggest rivals. It's a disaster scenario. And it's not all the Heat's fault. I know there was weird stuff with Joe Cronin really not wanting to negotiate with Pat Riley and this and that, but regardless, the Heat don't get it done, which is a disaster for them. Then Jrue Holiday becomes available, and I don't even know if the Heat actually went for him, but I do think he would have been a good fit. Instead, he lands with the Celtics, their other biggest rival in that Eastern Conference who they've got to now compete with. And this isn't the first time. Last summer, Donovan Mitchell became available, and it seemed like he wanted to be a Knick, but as we saw with the Cavs landing him, and then again with the Dame situation where the Bucks pick him up, it doesn't always matter where a superstar player wants to go. If you've got a package, if you can sneak in there, you can get it done, and they don't get it done. He lands with the Cleveland Cavaliers, another team that they're going to have to compete with out there in the East. They have failed a number of times to get Jimmy, Bam, Hero, the rest of these guys, another star player, which is what I really think they need to truly get over the hump and win a title with this group. If they had managed to get Damian Lillard here on the roster, a trio of him, Jimmy, and Bam is probably the best team in the East, especially because we've seen the Heat's ability to just almost manufacture great role players out of guys that have bounced around the league here and there. If they had gotten those guys, I would have picked them to win the Eastern Conference straight up. Instead, they're firmly a tier below those top 2 teams in my opinion, with Jimmy heading towards his mid-30s. They're running out of time to get Jimmy help that he needs, Bam help that he needs, with this core group of guys. There are certainly going to be other stars that become available at some point soon. I mean, Harden's available right now. I don't think they have any interest in him, but he is available. We could see maybe Embiid request out at some point. Maybe Donovan Mitchell becomes available, a Kawhi or a Paul George if the Clippers blow it up. Like, there's certainly possibilities out there for stars becoming available, but with the way the Heat have failed to get it done a number of times, I just don't know if they're really going to be able to make a trade happen for one of these stars, especially when they really just don't have the best trade package out of most teams. So really, to sum it all up, the Heat are in trouble. This offseason, they had a chance to capitalize off their momentum, go out there and add a really big name, a superstar, an all-star caliber player to help Jimmy, help Bam, get them over the hump, make it not just to the NBA Finals, but this time actually win them, make themselves the best team in a loaded Eastern Conference. Instead, their top two competitors got way better, in my opinion, established themselves as by far the two best squads in the conference, while the Heat, meanwhile, fall a step behind. And this isn't just a problem for the Heat, it's a problem for all the other teams trying to compete in the East. But as the squad that has been continuously up there towards the top of the East, been in multiple Eastern Conference Finals, made 2 NBA Finals over the past 4 years, to me, they were the team that very clearly needed to make this move to get over that hump and finally bring home the gold. They weren't able to do so, and now they head towards a season where it doesn't seem like they've got a chance to repeat last year's feat. Jimmy Butler is getting up there in age. There's no real superstar available for them to trade for at the moment. It's just kind of a mess of a situation. I don't think they're screwed or anything. There could very easily be a star that becomes available next offseason or the one following, and boom, they trade for them, and suddenly they are again up there towards the top of the East. But I'm starting to get less optimistic that that's actually going to ever be a scenario that plays out, and that Jimmy might just end up playing throughout his Miami Heat career as a really good player that probably should have gotten a ring at some point and is deserving of one, but just didn't have the help to get where he needed to go. So yeah, with all that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Comment down below letting me know where you think the Heat finish in this year's standings, and do you agree or disagree with me? Do you think they can beat these top 2 teams, or do you agree that they're kind of a step behind at this point? Where would you rank them overall in terms of Eastern Conference teams? Are they the 3rd best team, the 2nd, the 1st, the 4th, maybe like the 8th if you're just not a believer in what they have going on? And yeah, also if there's any like superstar caliber players that you think will become available soon that the Heat should target, let me know that too. I'm really curious because the Heat are in one of the more interesting scenarios in the NBA where they definitely don't need to blow it up, but they're kind of in a limbo where it just feels like they're waiting for someone to become available. But yeah, I really appreciate y'all watching. I will see you all later. Real one, say it back.